What happens when one of Britain's most outspoken television hosts comes face to face with the most controversial member of the royal family? You won't believe what unfolds when Kevin O'Sullivan decides he's had enough of Prince Harry's victim narrative and decides to call him out live on air. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is television dynamite that explodes into one of the most shocking confrontations ever captured on camera. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in what starts as a seemingly normal conversation, but quickly spirals into absolute chaos. Last night's episode of Kevin O'Sullivan's show was supposed to be just another celebrity appearance, but what actually happened will go down in television history as one of the most explosive confrontations ever witnessed. The tension was palpable from the very first handshake, and by the end, Prince Harry would storm off the set in a fit of rage, leaving O'Sullivan sitting there with a satisfied smirk that said everything. The stage was set for disaster from the moment Prince Harry walked onto the soundstage. O'Sullivan, known for his razor-sharp wit and refusal to bow down to celebrity status, sat behind his desk with that familiar glint in his eye that regular viewers know means trouble is brewing. Harry, dressed in his usual casual attire, seemed relaxed at first, but those who know how to read body language could see the subtle signs of defensiveness already creeping in. His shoulders were slightly raised, his smile just a bit too forced, and his hands fidgeting with his wedding ring in a way that suggested he was already on edge. The opening pleasantries were standard television fare, but O'Sullivan's tone carried an undercurrent that made it clear this wasn't going to be the softball interview Harry was probably expecting. "Prince Harry, thank you for joining us tonight," O'Sullivan began, his voice carrying that distinctive edge that has made him both beloved and feared in equal measure. "I have to say, it's quite refreshing to have someone on the show who's become such an expert at reinventing themselves." The comment hung in the air like a loaded weapon, and Harry's response was telling. Instead of laughing it off or responding with humor, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his reply came with just a hint of frost. "Well, Kevin, I suppose we all evolve as we grow older and learn more about ourselves and the world around us." The diplomatic non-answer was exactly the kind of response that O'Sullivan lives to tear apart, and viewers could practically see the host's predatory instincts kicking into high gear. O'Sullivan leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, and delivered his next line with surgical precision. "Evolution. Yes, that's one way to put it. Though some might call it a rather convenient transformation, wouldn't you say? From party prince to privacy advocate, from military hero to Hollywood celebrity. It's quite the journey." The words were delivered with O'Sullivan's trademark smile, but there was venom in every syllable, and Harry's facade of calm composure was already beginning to crack. The prince shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his media training warring with what was clearly a growing irritation. "I think that's a rather simplistic way to view someone's life journey, Kevin. We all make choices based on our circumstances and what we believe is right for our families." There it was, the first mention of family, the shield that Harry has wielded so effectively in countless interviews. But O'Sullivan wasn't about to let him hide behind it. "Ah, yes, family," O'Sullivan said, drawing out the word like he was savoring a fine wine. "That's interesting, coming from someone who spent the better part of the last few years publicly airing every piece of dirty laundry the royal family has. Tell me, Prince Harry, when you were writing your memoir and doing those interviews, did you consider what impact your revelations might have on your father, your brother, your stepmother? Or was the Netflix money just too good to pass up?" The question hit like a sledgehammer, and for the first time, Harry's carefully constructed mask slipped completely. His face flushed red, and his voice took on a sharp edge that viewers rarely hear from the usually composed prince. "That's completely unfair, Kevin. Everything I've shared has been my truth, my experience. I have every right to tell my own story, and if certain people are uncomfortable with that truth, then perhaps they should examine their own actions." O'Sullivan pounced on the opening like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Your truth, yes, we've heard that phrase quite a bit lately, haven't we? But here's what I find fascinating. Your truth seems to change depending on which platform you're using and how much you're being paid for it. Netflix gets one version, Oprah gets another, your book publishers get yet another. It's almost like you're selling different flavors of the same story to the highest bidder. The accusation landed with devastating effect. Harry's composure was now completely shattered, and he leaned forward aggressively, his voice rising. How dare you suggest that I'm making this up for money? Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up in that institution? Do you know what it's like to lose your mother and then watch the same press that killed her try to destroy your wife? But O'Sullivan wasn't backing down. If anything, Harry's emotional response seemed to energize him further. Oh, here we go with the victim narrative again. Yes, your mother's death was tragic, absolutely tragic. But that was over 25 years ago, Harry. At some point, don't you think it's time to stop using that tragedy as an excuse for every poor decision you've made since? The studio fell silent, except for the low hum of cameras capturing every moment of this train wreck in real time. Harry's hands were now visibly shaking with rage, and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You have absolutely no right to speak about my mother like that. None whatsoever. O'Sullivan sensed he had found the nerve he was looking for, and he pressed his advantage with ruthless efficiency. I'm not speaking about your mother, Harry. I'm speaking about you and how you've weaponized her memory to justify abandoning your duties, attacking your family, and cashing in on royal connections while simultaneously claiming you want nothing to do with them. It's having your cake and eating it too, isn't it? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio could feel that they had reached a point of no return. Harry's chest was rising and falling rapidly. His face was flushed with anger, and his eyes had taken on a dangerous glint that suggested that careful media training was about to give way to raw, unfiltered emotion. O'Sullivan sat back with a satisfied expression, knowing he had pushed his guest exactly where he wanted him, while the cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of what was clearly building toward an explosion that would make television history. What happened next would be replayed on social media millions of times, but no replay could capture the electric tension that filled that studio as these two men stared each other down. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Harry finally spoke, and when he did, his voice carried a venom that nobody expected. You know what, Kevin? Harry said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You sit there in your little studio, making your snide comments and your clever observations, but you don't know the first thing about what it's like to actually live with the consequences of being born into this circus. You think it's all privilege and fancy dinners, don't you? You have no idea what it costs. O'Sullivan's eyebrows raised in mock surprise, and his response was delivered with the kind of theatrical incredulity that has made him a master of confrontational television. Oh, spare me the sob story, Harry. You were born into unimaginable wealth and privilege. You had the best education money could buy, traveled the world, lived in palaces, and had every door opened for you before you even had to knock. And now you're sitting here trying to convince us that somehow you're the victim in all of this? The host leaned forward, his voice taking on a more aggressive edge. Let me tell you what I think really happened. I think you got tired of being the spare, tired of walking 3 steps behind your brother, tired of knowing you'd never be king. So, you found yourself a convenient American actress who filled your head with Hollywood dreams and victim narratives, and together you cooked up this whole exit strategy. Harry's face went white with fury, and he half rose from his chair before catching himself. Don't you dare bring my wife into this. Don't you dare. His voice was low and dangerous, and for a moment it seemed like he might actually lunge across the desk at O'Sullivan. But the host was just getting started. Oh, I'm sorry, is she off limits? Because she certainly didn't seem to think your family was off limits when she was making her accusations on international television. Racism, neglect, driving her to suicidal thoughts. Quite the laundry list of grievances, wasn't it? And how convenient that these revelations came just as you were launching your new careers in America. The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow, and his response came out in a roar that echoed through the studio. Those weren't lies. Everything we said was true. My wife was driven to the point where she didn't want to live anymore because of the way she was treated. And instead of protecting her, instead of protecting us, they threw us to the wolves." O'Sullivan's eyes lit up with predatory glee. He had Harry exactly where he wanted him: emotional, defensive, and making mistakes. And yet, mysteriously, none of these terrible experiences stopped you from cashing those Netflix checks, did they? $80 million to tell your story of suffering. Not bad work if you can get it. The host continued his assault with surgical precision. "Here's what I find truly remarkable, Harry. You claim you left the royal family to protect your privacy and your mental health, but then you proceed to do tell-all interviews, write memoirs revealing private conversations, and sign deals to put your entire life on display. You can't have it both ways. You can't demand privacy while simultaneously selling your story to the highest bidder." Harry was now on his feet, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. "You don't understand! We had to tell our story because nobody else would. The palace would never defend us, never correct the lies in the press. We were being destroyed by a machine that we had no way to fight, except by telling the truth." "The truth?" O'Sullivan's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Or your version of it? Because I notice your truth seems to conveniently paint everyone else as the villain while you and your wife emerge as the innocent victims. Your father, who funded your lifestyle for decades, villain. Your brother, who stood by you through every scandal, villain. Your grandmother, who welcomed your wife into the family with open arms, also somehow part of this grand conspiracy against you." The host stood up now, matching Harry's energy, and his voice rose to match the prince's emotional intensity. "You know what I think this really is, Harry? I think this is the world's most expensive midlife crisis. You hit your 30s, realized you weren't going to be the star of the show, got jealous of William's position, and decided to burn the whole thing down rather than accept your role." Harry's response was immediate and explosive. "Jealous? Jealous of William? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for that family? I served my country in Afghanistan while he was playing air ambulance pilot for photo ops. I've dedicated my entire adult life to charitable work, to helping veterans, to making a difference. And what did I get for it? I got to watch my wife be torn apart by the same press that destroyed my mother." O'Sullivan wasn't backing down. "Oh yes, your service in Afghanistan. Tell me, Harry, how many times have you mentioned that service since you left the royal family? Because it seems like every time you're backed into a corner, out comes the military service card. It's becoming quite the crutch, isn't it?" The insult landed like a slap across Harry's face. "How dare you diminish my service? I did 2 tours of duty while you were sitting safely in London making jokes on television. I've seen things, done things, lost friends in that war, and you have the audacity to call it a crutch?" "I'm not diminishing your service," O'Sullivan replied coldly. "I'm pointing out how you use it as a shield every time someone questions your behavior. Military service doesn't give you a free pass to betray your family and sell their secrets for profit." The word betray hung in the air like a smoking gun, and Harry's reaction was immediate and volcanic. "Betray? Betray? They betrayed me. They hung me out to dry. They let the press destroy my wife while they protected themselves. And when we asked for help, when we begged for support, they turned their backs on us." O'Sullivan sensed the kill and moved in for it. "So your response was to run to Oprah Winfrey and Netflix and turn your family trauma into entertainment. Your response was to publish private conversations with your father and brother. Your response was to air decades of private family moments for the world to judge? And you want us to believe you're the victim here?" The confrontation had now reached a fever pitch, with both men standing, voices raised, and the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Harry's face was crimson with rage, and his voice cracked with emotion as he delivered what would be his final devastating response. "You want to know what betrayal looks like, Kevin?" Harry's voice was raw, with years of pent-up fury. "Betrayal is watching your stepmother leak stories about your private conversations to her favorite journalists while she plays the victim in the press. Betrayal is having your own father's office brief against your wife to make Camilla look better by comparison. Betrayal is your brother screaming at you in front of your grandmother because you dared to fall in love with someone who didn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. The revelations hit the studio like grenades, and O'Sullivan's eyes widened momentarily before his predatory instincts kicked back in. So now we're getting to the real truth, aren't we? This isn't about racism, or mental health, or press intrusion. This is about Camilla. This is about your inability to accept that your father moved on after your mother died. This whole victim narrative is just you having a tantrum because daddy remarried. Harry's response was immediate and explosive. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. You don't know what it was like to watch that woman systematically erase my mother's memory while positioning herself as the wronged party. Do you know what it's like to watch the press rehabilitate the woman who helped destroy your parents' marriage while they tear apart your wife for existing? O'Sullivan leaned across his desk, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Your mother's been dead for over 25 years, Harry. At what point do you stop blaming everyone else for your problems and take responsibility for your own choices? At what point do you stop being a 40-year-old man throwing tantrums about his stepmother? The insult was the final straw. Harry's composure completely shattered, and he pointed an accusing finger directly at O'Sullivan. You smug, pathetic little man. You sit there in your studio making jokes about people's pain because it makes good television. You have no idea what real sacrifice looks like, what real service means, what it costs to actually stand up for what's right. But O'Sullivan wasn't finished. He had one more devastating blow to deliver, and he delivered it with the precision of a master assassin. Real sacrifice? Real service? Harry, your idea of sacrifice is giving up your HRH title while keeping all the financial benefits. Your idea of service is attacking your family on international television while cashing Netflix checks. And your idea of standing up for what's right is abandoning your duties the moment things get difficult. The host continued his brutal assessment, his voice rising with each word. You talk about service, but you quit the moment your wife decided she didn't like the job description. You talk about sacrifice, but you've monetized every aspect of your royal connections. You talk about standing up for what's right, but you've thrown your entire family under the bus for money and fame in Hollywood. Harry was now visibly shaking with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You don't know what you're talking about. We tried to make it work. We begged them for help, for protection, for basic human decency, and they turned their backs on us. So yes, we left. Yes, we told our story. And yes, we're building a life on our own terms instead of being prisoners to an institution that was killing us. O'Sullivan sensed the final moment had arrived, and he delivered his killing blow with surgical precision. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, the real Prince Harry. Not the victim he spent years pretending to be, but an entitled, spoiled man-child who couldn't handle being second fiddle to his brother. So he took his ball and went home to California to play victim for Netflix cameras. The host's voice rose to a crescendo of contempt. You've spent the last 4 years crying about privacy while selling every intimate detail of your life. You've complained about media intrusion while courting every camera in Hollywood. You've whined about being cut off financially while signing multi-million-dollar deals based entirely on your royal connections. You are everything that's wrong with celebrity culture, Harry. You're a fraud, a hypocrite, and frankly, a disgrace to the institution you claim to have served. The silence that followed was deafening. Harry stood frozen for a moment, his chest heaving, his face a mask of pure fury. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. I'm done with this. I'm done with people like you who think they have the right to judge my life, my choices, my family. You can sit here in your little studio and make your snide comments for your audience of bitter, small-minded people who get their kicks from watching others suffer. But I won't be part of it anymore. Harry reached up and yanked off his microphone, the sharp crack of the connection breaking echoing through the silent studio. You want to know what the real tragedy is, Kevin? It's that people like you have turned human suffering into entertainment. My mother's death, my wife's struggles, my family's pain, it's all just content for you, isn't it? Just another story to dissect and mock for ratings. O'Sullivan tried to interject, but Harry cut him off with a savage intensity that surprised everyone in the room. No, I'm talking now. You've had your fun. You've got your viral moment. You've proved whatever pathetic point you were trying to make. But here's something for you to think about when you're editing this circus for maximum clicks. I'm a human being. My wife is a human being. Our children are human beings. And we don't exist for your entertainment. The prince turned toward the exit, but O'Sullivan couldn't resist one final jab. Running away again, Harry? Just like you ran from your responsibilities? Just like you ran from your family? Just like you ran from everything that required actual commitment? Harry stopped dead in his tracks and slowly turned back to face the host. For a moment, it looked like he might charge across the studio, but instead, he delivered a response that was quiet, controlled, and absolutely devastating in its finality. You know what, Kevin? You're right about one thing. I am running. I'm running from people like you, from institutions that protect abusers and destroy the innocent, from a system that values duty over humanity. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of it. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's destroying you, even when small-minded people call you a coward for it. With that, Prince Harry turned and walked toward the studio exit, his security detail moving to flank him, but he wasn't finished. At the door, he paused and delivered his final words to the stunned studio. Enjoy your ratings, Kevin. Enjoy your viral clips and your social media buzz. But remember this, when the clicks stop coming and the attention moves on to the next victim, you'll still be exactly what you are right now. A bitter, irrelevant man who built his career on other people's misery. And that's something you'll have to live with long after this interview is forgotten. The heavy studio doors slammed shut behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent space. O'Sullivan stood behind his desk, his usual smug expression replaced by something that looked almost like shock. The crew members exchanged glances, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut the cameras. For several long seconds, the only sound in the studio was the quiet hum of equipment and the distant sound of Harry's entourage leaving the building. O'Sullivan slowly sank back into his chair, running a hand through his hair as he processed what had just happened. "Well," he finally said to the camera, his voice lacking its usual bombast, "I think it's safe to say that didn't go quite as planned." He attempted his trademark smirk, but it came across as forced and hollow. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Prince Harry, showing us exactly why he's no longer a working member of the royal family. But even as O'Sullivan tried to regain control of the narrative, everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. They had seen a man pushed to his absolute breaking point, and they had watched him choose dignity over engagement, principle over ratings, humanity over entertainment. The cameras finally stopped rolling, but the impact of what had just occurred would reverberate far beyond that studio, creating a moment of television that would be analyzed, debated, and remembered long after both men had left the spotlight forever.